So I'm new to dentistry. So tell me a little bit about insurance optimization and how Nexus Dental Solutions. What do you guys do with that?
So I think more importantly, it's recognizing why that became something, right? Like, why did that even become something that I explored? And that was because I ran into a challenge that I think every practice that takes dental insurance runs into, which is you find yourself with so many barriers, so many unpredictable outcomes, and a loss of revenue. And so, coming from being a hygienist, I'd never even considered the word revenue. I never even knew beyond someone having dental insurance or not having dental insurance what that meant for a business. And so 6 years ago, when I took on the role as the office manager and practice administrator for a large dental group in Summerlin, which is in Las Vegas, I started to really question some of the practices that were happening and had been happening for more than 2 decades in our current practice. And that's really where insurance optimization came from because I started to recognize so many inefficiencies that were causing more inefficiencies and, as a whole, loss of revenue. So that's when I started to explore a couple different aspects of revenue, and to determine how to fix it, I had to come up with a strategy. And that's when I created insurance optimization. So, insurance optimization for me was recognizing what did my current fee schedules look like? Was I current? Were my fees, if someone walked in the door and had no insurance, what would those fees look like? And are those at market value? That's number one. You have to know where you stand with just like a price point standpoint. Then you have to go, which insurance companies do I currently work with? And when I say work with, I mean, who do I have contracts with? And as simple as that may sound, it can be one of the hardest parts of this whole process is determining which contracts do I hold? Are those direct contracts with insurance companies, or are they leasing network contracts? And those are different and more complex as we start to get into the optimization process.
So
So
directly, sorry to cut you off. So how are practices losing revenue?
So one of the most common ways is, well, there's two most, I would say two of the most common is number one, they're just not staying current with their fees. And number two, they are not being in the driver's seat with their insurance contracts. So they go, I have to take insurance in order to grow my practice, to maintain my practice. What they don't realize is they are in the driver's seat if they do it right. And so losing revenue is merely being contracted with the wrong plans, with the wrong groups, and then not consistently renegotiating, which is also increasing those fees, right? So if you're regularly keeping your fees current, are your insurance fees also current?
So
Now,
when you say wrong plans, wrong insurance companies, what specifically do you mean by that?
oftentimes when we start our practice or we purchase a practice, we're kind of stuck with the bones of what's there. So just like if you bought an old house, you're going to have the old plumbing and electrical, and those things are part of that organization. I think the key is recognizing, are those insurance contracts there to serve not only the patients but the practice? And that often comes with, what kind of limitations do those contracts hold you to? Sometimes they are very detailed and they have a lot of limitations that really tie your hands when it comes to being paid fairly. And sometimes it's merely just a lack of negotiation to keep those fee schedules fair. So a lot of times it's neglect, and sometimes it's truly those plans are not good for practices and they should be avoided.
So would you say then that a lot of practices don't realize, one, that they can negotiate their fees, or they just don't realize that they're being paid very little for doing work because certain fee schedules, certain contracts pay well, and they think they're being paid on those and not, and they're receiving less than they anticipated.
Yeah, but what I see often, so let's go back to 10 or 15 years ago. If I'm Dr. Smith and I'm contracted with, let's just say, MetLife, I'm going to bill MetLife. MetLife is going to pay me. It's a very simple relationship. About 10 or 15 years ago, this this leasing network came into play and said, hey, why don't we reach out to all the dentists and say, do you want to grow your practice? Do you want to have more access to patients? What dentist would say no? And so they didn't. They said, well, I'd love to work with you. I want more patients. I want to grow my practice. And then at the same time, they went to the insurance companies and said, do you want to have access to more doctors and pay them less? And of course they said, yes, sign me up. And so they worked it from both ends. And so what happened is when you now have, if I'm Dr. Smith and I'm working with MetLife, if I am also contracted with a leasing network, I now give the insurance company the option to choose the lowest fee schedule to pay me. So, yes, it gives you options, but are those options good? And I think recognizing that sometimes too many options are actually detrimental to your practice.
So you think a lot of dentists are just taking the approach that I want to grow my practice. I've got, I need to grow my patient base. And so let's just take as many insurances as we can. Let's get as many plans involved as we can but by doing so, they're kind of undercutting their bottom line.
They are. And I think often the fear is, well, I have to have that. But it's not that. My approach is actually very conservative, because I'm not saying get rid of them. I'm saying take all of your patients and determine what options do those insurance plans have, because oftentimes, like for example, MetLife, if you're like, MetLife doesn't negotiate, they don't pay me well, you can stay in network with MetLife plans by using a leasing network that is partnered with MetLife, that has a strong negotiating power with the fee schedule. So now I've terminated with MetLife, but I've basically put all my focus on a leasing network that has less limitations, higher ability to negotiate, and I'm still in network. So I think sometimes we think, well, I can't go out of network with MetLife, or I can't go out of network with United Healthcare. And I'm not recommending that either. What I'm recommending is that you look at which pathway is best. And when I say which pathway is best, the one with the least resistance is the one that you should go with. You don't have to go out of network. You don't have to go fee for service. That's not always the answer.
So why don't you think that more doctors why aren't more doctors taking advantage of their opportunities to renegotiate contracts, to adopt new fee schedules, and to make more revenue per patient?
I think one is that the knowledge is just not out there that it's an option. I think you start with a contract and you assume that contract is just like you sign up for a mortgage and you're tied to it for 30 years. That's just not how this works. Once you start a contract, that contract, you can negotiate those terms whenever you want. Now, they can tell you no, but the key is that there's actually a lot of negotiation power that takes place every 2 to 3 years, and most contracts sit for more than 10 years without being touched. So I think lack of knowledge that it's available, and lack of time or team members that have the knowledge and ability to do it. And so I think oftentimes we sit where we're comfortable because there's money coming in, we're happy enough. We don't consider that you can do everything you've always done and just make more money. You don't have to work harder, you just have to work smarter.
So in your opinion, if someone went through this process of optimizing their insurance by renegotiating contracts, kind of, again, in your opinion and generally speaking, kind of what kind of increases do you think you would anticipate after going through an optimization?
Generally speaking, I would say more than 25% of your bottom gross.
Wow.
So it's actually really big. Now, I think what most people don't recognize is, just like investments don't make you millions overnight, right? Like you don't make money overnight in most cases. In most cases, there's a little bit of weight in that process. And that's with insurance optimization. And that's where like what I've done comes in, because having somebody that knows and understands this is key. Not everybody can do it. It's something you have to understand the processes and the intricacies of it in order to do it well. But there's
Right. So
6 months of time where you're paying someone like myself, or paying someone in your office to navigate it with me before you ever see money come in the door. So you're paying to have someone identify the fees, identify the contracts, and then begin negotiating so you can determine what you're going to keep and what you're going to get rid of. So you're actually not going to make any money for about 6 months. The
so
real
yeah,
money comes in.
take us through that process then. So obviously this is not a short-term deal. This is not a
It's
short-term fix. I mean, ultimately, kind of what is the total time frame? Do you think that the total time frame needed to implement something like this? And then what does that process look like with the doctor, the team, the insurance department, and everybody involved?
So it really depends on the size of your practice, but I'll give you the example of my most intricate project, which is my current practice. Not other projects that are side projects, practices I help that are much smaller. This is my practice. So I have 5 providers, 2 tax IDs, and 12 hygienists. So that gives you an idea of the size and volume in which I'm dealing with. I would say we were, from start to finish, 3 years, we were at max, basically max opportunity. And then the maintenance of that is simple. I would say for a smaller single doc practice, within 12 months, you should see that difference.
Okay. what are some of the pain points that you see either for patients or for staff as you implement something like this?
I think the biggest thing is being able to consider that there's a different way forward. I think you're used to going, well, we've been contracted with MetLife. I feel like I'm picking on MetLife here, but MetLife's actually not a bad deal. So MetLife, if I've been contracted with them for 10 years, it almost feels like a breakup, right? To like terminate that contract. When that happens, there is a transition period where those plans may not recognize that you actually have another connection point. So if I'm a practice and I have a leasing network and I have MetLife and I terminate MetLife, there's going to be that moment where it's like, oh, hold on, there's a detour here. I got to go over here. And so there will be temporarily claims processed out of network. And then you have to request them to be reprocessed as you teach the new pathway, because that pathway does take I would say a couple of months generally to get worked out depending on your volume.
How labor intensive is that for your insurance department? What kind of training would need to take place with them?
It's really not. I think the big idea is the goal of all of this isn't just we're doing dentistry, we're making money, but we're doing dentistry and we're making really good money. And so I think helping them to recognize the purpose behind it helps recognize that when there are some additional asks or labor, that it doesn't feel quite as heavy because they understand the why behind it. But I standardize everything. So I have a standard form that says basically to whom it may concern, you processed our claim out of network. However, we are contracted with this leasing network, which you are as well. Please reprocess this claim. And it's standard. It's something that we provide and offer to you. So you're not creating any of this from scratch. You're merely just sending it in and requesting the reprocess. Once you get those reprocessed a few times, I'd say less than a dozen, those insurance companies, they rechart the course real quick.
So for patients, what differences do patients see in care and cost?
Patients don't see any change in care or cost. Well, I should backtrack actually, because that's not true. Patients see better quality of care. So as insurance companies keep their fees low, your doctor can't afford to give you as much time as he would like. So as a hygienist, I saw that firsthand. When we didn't optimize, we really were kind of stuck where each hygienist could have no more than 45 minutes with a hygiene patient. So whether that's a prophy, perio maintenance, without x-rays, we really were kind of stuck in this equation where we couldn't have a full hour because we couldn't afford to pay the wages of the hygienist and the cost to turn over the room and all the things that associate at the fees that we were getting paid. So by negotiating our fee schedules, it gave my hygienists a better work environment. It gave my patients better quality of care because it allowed us to spend that full hour, which some doctors feel is unattainable because of the amount they're being reimbursed. So the quality of care goes up, and of course the reimbursement as well.
So what you're saying is if a dentist wants to make more money, have more quality time with their patients, and essentially make it, increase morale with their staff and then they should be looking at insurance optimization because really the money provides the opportunity.
It really does. And I think you don't hear about it a lot. To be honest, I've been in dentistry 15 years. I had never heard of it. And it really was me basically going, why are we doing this? And then I started to go, well, I guess if nobody's created a plan, I'm going to. And so that's kind of my thing. If I see a problem, I'm like, well, I guess I can figure it out. And I think that's something I learned from you, honestly, because you were like, find a way, figure it out. And I found myself really frustrated. Okay, so if my hygienists need more per hour, right? Compensation spiked through COVID, but I can't afford to pay you more. I think you're wonderful. You're doing a great job. Our patients love you, but I can't pay you more. And so that's a really awful feeling as the employer to go, you deserve it, but there's nothing to give. And so to me, it was more about creating opportunity for everyone in my practice to be paid the way they should be paid and in turn serve our patients better than we ever had before. And so to me, it was not just about making more money, but by making more money, it allowed me to pay people better, which in turn improved our culture and in turn improved our patient experience. And so when I first started, I didn't realize that it would be such a full circle moment. I thought it would just make us more money. I had no idea that it would actually fix my compensation challenges, my patient quality, quality patient care, the reviews my practice was getting, and my team satisfaction and culture. And it fixed all of those things pretty drastically within the first 12 months.
Awesome. Anything else you want to add?
I think the most important is I tried to figure out how to help people with this was like, what if someone doesn't have the finances or isn't quite there yet to like hire me to do it? That's why we created a secondary program that was really a step-by-step process for someone in your practice that's capable, that's loyal, that's there to help you. They're their office manager, your treatment coordinator. We wanted to create two pathways. We wanted one that was supported, facilitated, and then there was one that was hands-free, right? Like, my practice is busy, I need you to do this for me, because I think there's a place for both. I think that there's people that want to use their team to embed these practices and changes, and I'm there to support you along the way, but your practice is doing it yourself. And then there's the part where you say, hands off, I want Nexus Dental Solutions to do it for me and just have touch points. And so that for me was a big thing, is creating opportunity for both.
So if people are interested in what you're offering, how do they get a hold of you, and kind of what's the process look like?
So the best way to reach us is going to be through our website, nexusdentalsolutions.com. You can get in touch with my husband, Ezra. He handles and fields all the calls, kind of figures out what patients' needs are. And then, yeah, you're doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, we can set up a call to kind of discuss where you're at and see what options we have available for you.
You can also reach Kim at kim.irvin at nexusdentalsolutions.com or me at e.irvin at nexusdentalsolutions.com. We're happy to answer any of your questions and help you get started. Kim, I know you're busy. Have a wonderful day, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thank you. Bye. Bye.